Foster Care Nation, listen up. This is
Foster Care and Unparalleled Journey.
strength for the powerless, courage for the fearful, hope and healing for wounded hearts. Hello and welcome back to Foster Care, an Unparalleled Journey with Jason.
And Amanda.
And today's guest is Frank King.
Woo!
Frank is here to talk about something super fun.
Oh, yeah.
Something that we all just love to talk about. And I guess here's a quick warning for the listeners. There's going to be some conversation about some potentially sensitive topics for some people. If you have little ears in the car, if you might not want to have to answer those questions later, this might be a great one to come back and listen to, or slap some earbuds in, because we're going to talk about suicide today.
Yes. Which makes some strong emotions, so be careful.
Yeah, and if you have a curious 6-year-old, this might not be a conversation you want to have with them yet. That's up to you. Just want to give everybody a heads up. How you doing today, Frank?
I am busier than a hooker at a four-way stop.
Oh man, that's busy.
Well, she hopes it's busy so she can eat today.
That's correct.
Oh man. Well, we were just looking up information like we always do. We're looking for things to help people.
Oh.
One of the things I've found is just the prevalence of this topic in the foster care system. I forget the incident rates of suicide for the average population, but attempts are at about 3 times that on kids who've been in the foster care system, and actual ideation is, I think, 3 times. I think ideation is 3 times rate, and attempts are at 4 times rate. I think that's the numbers that I looked up this morning, and I was like, that's a lot. That's a high percentage. So who better to talk about it than somebody who talks about suicide and manages to do it in an entertaining way? We've got a TED speaker with us here today. So Frank, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe how suicide's impacted your own life?
Well, I was a writer for The Tonight Show for 20 years. I've been a speaker and comedian full-time for 34. I have 5 TEDx talks. Actually, I've been selected 7 times. 2 of them I couldn't make because I had full fee speaking obligation the same day. I was putting a trailer together for my TEDx coaching, and I said into the camera, look at it. I've turned down more TEDx talks than most people have.
Amen.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible.
He said, bragging. I live with 2 mental illnesses, major depressive disorder, better known colloquially as depression, and something far more rare, the chronic suicidal ideation. And chronic suicidal ideation means, for me and people in my tribe, the option of suicide is always on the menu as a solution to problems large and small. When I say small, I had a car breakdown a couple of years ago. I had 3 thoughts on the day. 1, get it fixed. 2, buy a new one. 3, I could just kill myself. That is suicidal ideation, which may sound odd to some of your listeners. However, every time I've spoken, keynoted, or trained in the last 6 years, except for one time, somebody in the audience had chronic suicidal ideation, sometimes more than one person. They didn't know it had a name. They thought they were just some kind of freak because of the way their brain worked, and all alone. And I had a young woman come up to me after a college presentation and say, thank you for your keynote. I said, you're welcome. She goes, but it made me weep. How did it make you weep? She said, your story about your car, get it fixed, buy a new one, kill yourself. I go, yeah. She goes, I've been having those thoughts all my life. I didn't know it had a name. I thought I was just some kind of freak. I was all alone. And when I heard you say that out loud, I realized for the first time in my life that I am not alone, and I wept. So there may be people, even clinicians. I've spoken to clinicians. I go, I've got chronic suicidal ideation, and they stare at me like George Bush at the New York Times crossword puzzle. And because apparently it's not in the DSM. So if it's not in the DSM, it doesn't exist.
Oh yeah.
So we may have actually saved a life today in the last 90 seconds, because hopefully if someone has it, now realize it has a name, they're not just some kind of freak. They're not all alone. My hope is we've steered them far enough off the path of suicide that, they'll live a normal life. And hopefully they will speak to their therapist, because I've had this happen before. Somebody comes up, I go, do you have a therapist yet? Well, you need to make an appointment, I think, and tell them all you learned today. And for God's sakes, tell them you Googled it. Don't tell them you learned it from a comedian. So yeah, those are my two mental illnesses. It runs in my family. More nuts in my family than in a squirrel turd. My grandmother died by suicide. My mother found her. My great aunt died by suicide. My mother and I found her. I was 4 years old. I screamed for days. If you want to know the story, I'll spare you. But my first TEDx talk called A Matter of Laugh, L-A-U-G-H, A Matter of Laugh or Death. I cover that story. And I myself in 2010, after speaking business dropped off 80%, we filed a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. I learned what the barrel of my gun tastes like. Spoiler alert, I did not pull the trigger. Which, by the way, gets a nervous laugh from the audience. Like, should we be laughing at this? And then I followed up with a true story. A friend of mine was in the audience. He never heard me say that out loud, that I didn't pull the trigger. He comes up afterwards. He goes, hey, man, how come you didn't pull the trigger? I go, hey, man, could you try to sound slightly less disappointed? So I myself, and that's when I began to consider speaking on suicide as a keynote. I've been a funny speaker from 1985 when I started in stand-up full-time to that point in the recession of 2010. And I always wanted to have something, significant to talk about, something to teach people, learning objectives, takeaways, action items. I just had no idea what I had that I could teach anybody. And after that close call, looking at my family history, taking getting some education on suicide prevention, and then doing that first TEDx talk. I did the first TEDx talk so I could rebrand, because everyone thought of me as a funny person. So at age 56, I did the TEDx, and nobody knew, my family, my wife, my friends, nobody had any idea I was depressed and suicidal. So I came out on stage, on the TED stage, as depressed and suicidal. My wife's getting ready to hit the button to play once it went up on YouTube. I said, no, hold on. Don't hit the button. I need to tell you half a dozen things you're about to learn about me. And I just don't want you to learn it there watching YouTube, let me tell you, because she had no idea. So, but that gave me that was the beginning of my rebranding. I could prove that I could talk about something serious. And what I discovered preparing for the talk was that even though one person dies by suicide every 11 minutes in the US on average, hardly anybody talks about depression, thoughts of suicide. However, if you bring it up, everybody's got a story. Themselves, a loved one, a friend, a college roommate. So I realized there was a niche there just in which to speak, especially being a man. Men are notoriously shy about sharing things that have to do with emotions.
We don't have those, right?
I was raised in the Southeast, and big boys don't cry.
Yeah, we don't have emotions. That's a rule.
Yeah, that's right. You pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and it's not just mental health in men. I've had several friends die of prostate and colon cancer, men, and those are eminently treatable if you catch them early. But men tend to let their physical health go as well. Same reason, no colonoscopy, no PSA test. It's a shame, but that's just how. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, that my co-authors and I are putting together a series of 4 books on men's mental health. 2 of them are out. The 3rd will come out this year. The 4th next year. They're anthologies, 12 stories in each book, 12 guys. Kind of like Chicken Soup for the Tortured Man's Soul. And we asked men what kind of advice they want in the book. And they said, we want real men, real stories, real problems, and real solutions. How are they coping? So that's what we did. Because men tend to take advice from men. My wife would tell you that she could give me a Nobel Prize winning idea, and I would poo-poo it. If the mailman told me the same thing, I'm all over. So it's the way men are wired. So that's where we are.
Did you hear that, Amanda? That's the way we're wired. It's not my fault.
I heard it. That's why I throw bricks.
It's hard wiring.
Yeah, it's hard wiring.
When we first got together, I had to explain to her once that it's better for you if you will just write a note, wrap it around a brick, and then chuck it at my head.
Yeah, it's as effective, if not more.
We have several bricks here.
Yeah.
She bought a pallet.
So that's my. I started comedy in 4th grade. Told my first joke. Everybody laughed. The teacher was hysterical, and I thought I'm going to be a comedian. And then 12th grade did a talent show, won, and then just by chance after college moved to San Diego, where there's a branch of the world famous comedy store, the one on Sunset. And I went to open mic night in 5 minutes. I did my 5 minutes. Halfway through, I thought to myself, I'm home. I'm going to do this for a living. I have no idea how. And then a year later, my girlfriend, now my wife of 33 years, went on the road, gave up our apartment, jobs, and just hit the road for 2,629 nights in a row nonstop. And
Your wife of how long?
Big pardon?
How long have you been married?
We've been married 33 years.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That's 3 comic marriages, because living with comedians is not the easiest thing.
I've heard that.
Yeah. I got a friend who won't shut it off, and all of his 3 ex-wives love him to death. I think he just wore them out.
I mean, it happens.
I can't. If I live with him, I have to duct tape him to the bed and put a sock in his mouth because he never shuts up.
We have people like that.
Yes, we do.
So yeah, that's my story in a nutshell. Pardon the pun.
Well, I know that when we talked before, you had mentioned that your wife had some experience in foster care. We obviously have a deep amount of experience in foster care, and that's something that ties deeply into that system is all the trauma that kids experience. Most of these kids who come into care don't come into care just because it was a thing to do this weekend.
Well, no, life is sunshine and roses,
right? But then you dig into their deeper story, and you find a lot of scary stuff in there. People have been through a lot, especially at young ages. And that seems to lead into a lot of the problems with mental health, which can lead towards suicidal ideation, all that sort of thing. So, we have a lot of kids who are dealing with a lot of stuff. And so, I think the question your friend asked is really appropriate. When you find yourself in that place, when you're walking down that road, what is the thing that helps you decide that the trigger is just too heavy to pull at the moment?
Well, I didn't kill myself because I had $1 million life insurance policy. The problem is, in that particular policy, they have what's called a 2-year, it's the nickname for it is 2-year suicide clause. It's actually called the incontestability clause. Meaning if you're a smoker, let's say, and you get a policy and you lie to the company and you go, no, I don't smoke. And if they don't figure it out in 2 years, at 2 years a day, if you die of lung cancer from smoking 3 packs of Marlboros a day, I'm sorry, you got 2 years to figure that out. And suicide, same thing. If if you know you're suicidal, or if you did, you had 2 years figured out. So I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but there's a 3-legged stool for suicidal ideation. The first leg is withdrawing socially, sometimes physically moving away. Second one is you cross that middle barrier that you're willing to take your own life regardless of the pain. And the third is something called burdensomeness. You hear people say that suicide is a selfish act. Well, from the outside looking in, it is. From the inside looking out, oftentimes, and I was included in this class of people, I believe the world would be better off without me because we just filed bankruptcy and we're on the verge of losing our farm and everything else. And I had $1 million life insurance policy. However, I'd only had it 22 months, not 2 years. So I had to wait 60, 61 days before I pulled the trigger. Otherwise, they would just return the premiums to my wife and not the $1 million in proceeds. So I felt, I was literally worth more dead than alive. And I felt that burdensomeness, she'd be better off. She'd be brokenhearted, but she wouldn't be broke. The benefit of chronic suicidal ideation is because I knew I could do it at any time. Waiting 2 months and a day was no big deal because I knew it 2 months and a day I could pull the trigger. And so but fortunately, by 2 months and a day, I don't even remember that day. Life must have gotten a little bit better. The bankruptcy went through, the phone call stopped. And, I guess I had broken the service, taken a deep breath and figured I could go on. But it's ironic in that my chronic suicidal ideation keeps me alive because I know if the pain gets too bad, I can end it. And a lot of people don't realize that many, if not most suicides are not about killing yourself, it's about ending the pain. As with, I'm sure, foster kids, if they're in a horrible situation, as my wife was, physically and sexually abused, verbally abused, horrible father, passive mother who also didn't like her, didn't want kids, wish she never got married. So, that's my lovely wife just wanted to end the pain. Now, I remember when I met her, she had scars on her wrist where she had attempted. Fortunately, she didn't attempt, up the arm. The wrist, it's kind of a misconception. You cut your wrist not across the wrist, but up and down your arm if you really want to. That's, and I probably just as a young person, she just had heard cut your wrist, and so she cut her wrist and survived. But then she turned to drugs, weed, and other things to cope. And then fortunately, at some point, she got into the foster care system and had a series of foster moms and dads. And I'm sure as with any business, there were good ones and bad ones. And fortunately, one of her elementary school teachers went to the foster care program, said, "I want to be a foster parent." And they said, "Okay." She goes, "On one condition." "What's the condition?" I get Wendy as my foster child." And they said, "Okay." So, and that was the first unconditional love she'd ever, experienced. Plus, there were rules, she would tell you. The family had rules, but love was unconditional. And that probably saved her life, and they're still friends to this day.
Yeah, that's an all too common story that a lot of kids have. It's a danger that kids are always subjected to in the foster care system. There's always a moment of trauma happening at every given moment around the world somewhere. And these kids have experienced so much, and I'm always wondering what the way to help a kid is who is in that place, because some of these kids are young. My let me get this right. My stepsister's daughter. Yes, my stepsister's daughter. We have a family with a lot like relationship algebra, so I always have to think a little bit to make sure I get the relationship in
Family
my mind.
math.
Yeah.
But, my stepsister had a nasty disease called Huntington's, and we lost her a few years back. And then, what was it? I think 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, her daughter was going through some serious suicidal ideation, some depression, and eventually she hung herself, and when we lost her to suicide as well, and she was 13 or 14, I believe, years old. And it just seems like it touches every kid, and I don't know that there's a blanket answer, but is there anything that you can talk to help kids as they see this thing going in their life that looks too big to overcome?
Well, and it's not just foster kids. I have my best friend from North Carolina attempted at age 4, age 8, and age 12. Diagnosed eventually with living with bipolar disorder.
So,
And I believe his mom was bipolar. I mean, just looking back, and I think it's important. People go, "What do I say to somebody who's depressed?" Well, don't say anything. Start by just actively listening. B, do not minimize the pain. Things will get better. You got so much to live for. Tomorrow's another day. Let's not talk about tomorrow. Well, for those of us, oftentimes who are experiencing that, can't see beyond today. They feel like it will always be as painful as it is today. I think diagnosis, an evaluation, a mental health evaluation. I always recommend a mental health evaluation to find out, is it situational depression? Is it clinical depression? Is it bipolar disorder? What is exactly going on? Second, if medication is indicated, then I would recommend medication. If the first recommended medication doesn't work, I would give the child a cheek swab DNA test for psychotropics, where they compare the young person's DNA with a long list of, let's say, antidepressants. Pick the one or two that are going to work best with their metabolism. So you get a lot less of the going on, doesn't work, taper off, going on, doesn't work, taper off. Because that's discouraging, it's painful, it's an awful process. And then therapy, if it's indicated, if it's available. I would say therapy. And on the flip side of that, I did a TEDx talk called Mental with Benefits, the Evolutionary Advantages of Mental Health. Because I kept meeting people who were mentally ill, and if they weren't completely dysfunctional, they always had some kind of superpower. You know, they were artistic, musical, great writers, comedians, dear Lord. A friend of mine's got a joke about comedians. There are two kinds of comedians, diagnosed, undiagnosed. I think my comic ability, imagination, and writing ability, whatever, is just the flip side of my depression, thoughts of suicide. It's all the same wiring. It's the way my brain processes. And in my TEDx talk, I said, look, here's the deal. What if those of us living with a mental illness are not living with a genetic mutation, but an amazing evolutionary adaptation? And what if you can convince a child, yes, you have a mental illness, but here's what they never tell you. You have a corresponding mental ableness that your peers can't touch. So the idea is you treat the mental illness, certain medication, whatever, and then you wrap your arms around whatever mental ableness they have and celebrate it and energize it. And that hopefully will change the frame for the child and for their peers, reducing stigma and bullying and eventually suicide. So if it turns out they have a clinical illness, there may be some sort of ability. 30 Fortune 500 companies in the US are now hiring people on the spectrum with autism for their special abilities and paying them handsomely for those. I think each child's IEP, individual education plan, should be truly individual. Let's say a kid's got OCD, then why not make sure they're in the STEM program, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, every one of those disciplines, every problem to solve in those has one right answer, ideal for some with OCD. And then steer them in a career path where they'll end up with an industry that values precision, engineering, math, engineering, banking, architecture, where they really precision to detail is rewarded handsomely. Now, if they're dyslexic, STEM is just ridiculous because it's letters and numbers moving around on a page. But multi-level complex tasks, the humanities, the arts, and I think not only curriculum should be adjusted for the child, but the teaching method. I got a friend from my time on the cruise ship who was a music teacher, instruments, brass. And he said the best students he had were the ones with ADD, ADHD. The problem was you strap them in a chair for 50 minutes. First 10 minutes, they get better. Next 40 minutes, they're spending so much energy just trying to sit still. So on a whim, he bought an egg timer. And he set up for 10 minutes and told the young person, look, we're going to practice scales for 10 minutes. And then we'll go do something else. So 10 minutes, egg timer goes off. Now we're going to practice our breathing for 10 minutes. Egg timer goes off. Now we're going to practice those two pieces you're playing at the concert on Saturday. Egg timer goes off. It was amazing. The child knowing that whatever they're doing would come to an end in 10 minutes and they changed tasks. They didn't have to worry about trying to sit still, and concentrate. So I think both the education plan and the way the curriculum is taught should vary by child. Some kids, I don't think every child is ready for first grade at age 6. Why is age 6 a magic number for first grade?
Amen.
Could be 7, could be 5. Who knows? So yeah, and I understand with large numbers of children, it's kind of like a factory system. It's got to be, you can only do so much individually.
But I think the interesting thing in today's world, sitting in the middle of COVID stuff and virtual schooling, I have a young boy. He's not been diagnosed. He's 5, and if you want a picture of ADHD, I can show you what it looks like.
Yeah,
he is wild. And as you're talking about that, I'm sitting here thinking about our little guy, Frankie. He would probably really benefit from something like that because getting him to sit still for more than 10 minutes requires like more than a whole roll of duct tape. We've had to upgrade to Gorilla Tape to get in the chair.
Well, yeah, I mean, with virtual schooling, so our little ones are at home and I'm schooling them. Zoom meetings are it's a killer for him to get him to sit there. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, we have a box that I have different sensory toys in and just different things. And, we have found over the years, different kids learn differently. They all need different things. Some kids are visual, some are audio. it's different across the board, and you can't treat them the same because it just doesn't work.
Yeah, that's and like I said, and there's an evolutionary element, by the way. I tell the audience, look, here's the deal: ADD, ADHD. It's now considered a disability. But back in the time of the cavemen and women, having your head on a swivel was a survival technique, survival skill. It's very funny, or it's intended to be funny. Squirrel, but you know what? Velociraptor. That's important information.
Well, yeah, shiny.
Yeah. So I figured, I told you, look, if I back in the day, if I was a caveman, running things, I would have those people working as pickets and scouts, and all the way around the tribe as we move from winter lands to summer lands or whatever, because their heads on a swivel. They're always looking for. And by the way, dyslexics generally have better peripheral vision, and most of us see pretty much straight ahead. We can see the stuff on the exterior, but we focus straight ahead. Dyslexics tend to focus in a panoramic fashion. And they also have an amazing ability to pick out the anomaly. The joke I wrote was, never play Where's Waldo with a dyslexic for money, because you're going to lose. And if I was walking from summer, grounds to winter grounds in my tribe, I would have the dyslexics up front scanning the tree line, because what looks like a bush to the rest of us, that ain't no bush, man. That's a guy with leaves stuck all over his body. I'm telling you. So these were all survival skills back eons ago. Bipolar. Anthropologists figured pretty much everybody was bipolar back then for a couple of reasons. They had 4 months in the summer to gather enough stuff for 8 months in the winter. So they were uber hunters and gatherers. They were hypersexual because you have to keep the numbers up in the tribe. And they go all summer long, just like 60. And then as the days grew shorter and the nights grew colder, they would wind down into a depressive state and just hunker down until the spring, when days began to get longer and nights began to get warmer, and they would repeat the process. So those things that we think of, many of them as disabilities back then, were survival skills.
Yeah, but we call it a disability today.
Yes, and again, I think we should treat the disability, but if there is an ability, a special ability, then I think we should wrap our arms around, energize, encourage that, whatever that is, because think of Harry Potter. He's a little weird, half muggle, half human, and with a lightning bolt, whatever. But he's got special powers. What kid doesn't want to be, to have special powers like that? I think that if we can convince them that whatever ability it is they have, whether it's artistic or musical or comedy or whatever, that their peers can't touch, then I think we could go a long way. And I think education should begin in middle school, with age appropriate curriculum, and talk about depression, thoughts of suicide, bipolar, like they teach sexual education, I guess. I don't know if they still do that, but teach kids about mental health and mental illness. And for parents, by the way, there's a great organization called mentalhealthfirstaid.org, mentalhealthfirstaid.org. They have an 8-hour class. There's a youth class and an adult class. And it's kind of mental health 101. It costs anywhere from nothing to about $25 for the 8 hours. They toss in lunch. If you go to mentalhealthfirstaid.org, put in your zip code and 25-mile radius, they'll tell you where every class is within a 25-mile radius. I'm sure they're all by Zoom at this point.
Yeah.
But again, costs almost nothing. And you get a binder when you're done. So let's say, and it goes anywhere from depression through non-lethal self-harm, like cutting, biting, burning, all the way to suicide. So a parent, you got a binder and you find out your child or somebody they know is cutting, then you go and look and see what the symptoms are and what the solutions are. Because I think if we could teach young people about mental illness, signs and symptoms of mental illness, they could look out and convince them that they are in the mental health vernacular gatekeepers. They're looking out. You're looking out for everybody else. See something, say something. And there was a young woman, daughter of a friend of mine, who noticed something about one of her peers in her class, a young woman, and the things she was saying, posting on Facebook. And she was really worried that the young woman was going to end her life. So she took it upon herself to march down to the counselor's office and go, look, hey, this is what she's been writing in her timeline, and this is what she's been saying, and somebody needs to step up and, get her some help. And sure enough, she was struggling. I believe she ended up, with clinical depression and thoughts of suicide, and she's alive today because one of her classmates, sometimes parents don't want to see those kind of things in their children because A, they feel like it's their fault. B, they don't want their child to be anything but perfect. So they go into something of a, denial phase.
Well, in the foster care system, a lot of parents come in with this savior idea when they first step into it. And they think if I just love this kid, it'll be fine and it'll all be better. And we hate to see, this kid struggling and that I can't fix it. And that's another reason why it tends to be ignored.
Yeah, and parents are in the fix it business. I'm a mom, I can fix it. So yeah, I think education for the adults and education for the young people, age appropriate. And I think it should be a continuing, that there's a class in middle school, there's a class in high school, class in college. I think it should be required because 3 college students a day, every day, kill themselves. 3 a day, every day.
Wow.
Why not require that students in college, just like you got to take gym to get your 2 credits to graduate. The state of Washington, by the way, is now mandating that anybody in the healthcare business, chiropractors, dentists, hygienists, doctors, nurses, social workers, have to have 3 hours of suicide prevention CE to renew their licenses in 2021. All of them. Because that way, the chiropractor, the doctor, the dentist, the hygienist are all on the lookout for signs and symptoms. I speak to dentists frequently because that occupation has a high rate of suicide. And I said, here's the deal. If your patient comes in, sits down in the chair, you put a little bib on, and you notice that their hair's, not as clean as it usually is, clothes are a little, dirty, and they haven't been taking care of their dental hygiene as they would have done in the past. One of the signs of depression is letting your personal hygiene go because you just can't drag yourself out of bed in the morning to get the shower and run a load of wash. So you notice that, again, see something, say something. I think it's the more people who knew the signs and symptoms of depression, mental illness, thoughts of suicide, the better. There's an outfit called QPR, Question, Persuade, Refer, QPRinstitute.com. It's like CPR. If you're going to have a heart attack, have it in Seattle. 1 out of 4 people in Seattle know CPR. QPR wants those same numbers, people to be educated on the signs and symptoms and then what to do with mental illness and thoughts of suicide. Because, if you have a heart attack, the sooner somebody starts pumping on your chest, and the sooner somebody gets the AED, that electronic paddles that walk you through the process, and the sooner the paramedics and professional help arrives, the sooner they get them to the hospital where the cardiologist will work on, the better the long-term life expectancy. Same thing with mental illness. The sooner somebody realizes that somebody's in a mental health crisis, the sooner they can get them, you're basically a mental health first responder. You're not there to fix them. You're just there to make sure that they're safe and then get them and turn them over to the professionals, as happens with CPR. Somebody has a heart attack, you do CPR, you bring them around, you're not going to do a bypass right there. We'll leave that to the professional. I
hope not.
Yeah. So, I'm sure there's a YouTube video where we'll teach you how to do it, but that's the idea behind QPR is that that organization wants at least 1 in 4 people in the U.S. to know. I was at a function in the Chicago area. There were 300 or 400 people there. And the table behind me, a guy collapses, fell right out of his chair. And everybody freezes, except the comedian. I would go running over. I go, hey, man, okay, can you hear me? Yes. Can you see me? Yes. Do you have any pain down your left arm or underneath your chin? Because down the left arm is where heart attack symptoms present. If it gets to your chin, right here, that's serious. Right there, the chin line, jawline. That's really serious. No pain. I said, I said, are you diabetic? He said, yes, I'm diabetic. I said, I think he's short on insulin. So there's everybody staring at the comedian diagnosing the guy who just hit the floor. But the fact that I've had 2 aortic valve replacements, double bypass, heart attack, 3 stents, I'm very familiar with heart attacks. And, you know, and not so much diabetes, but I figured it out. But if everybody had, you know, would A, take the training, and doesn't take that long, and B, step up like I did, get up off your ass and get to the person and get them stable and get them professional help. And I asked him, by the way, it was a very conservative group. I said, for cognition, I said to him, hey man, who's president? And this is in Trump's first term, I think. Who's the president? He goes, not Hillary Clinton. I go, okay, you're fine. Yeah. So yeah, I think education would save lives. Again, because, you know, there's a stigma surrounding mental illness and a whole separate stigma surrounding thoughts of suicide. And people just don't want to talk about it. Just, you know, it's kind of where alcoholism was 50, 60 years ago. A lot of people still think mental illness is a moral failing and a character flaw, as they did with substance abuse disorder 40, 50 years. There's a reason that Alcoholics Anonymous started off anonymous, because there was that perception that it was a character flaw and a moral failing. You know, and you could just quit drinking. And people say to me, I've had it said to me, you need to choose joy. If you're not talking about liquid, dishwashing detergent, I don't think that's going to happen. Don't you think if I could choose joy, I would have done that decades ago? Come on. But that a lot of people, you know,
you became a comedian.
Yeah,
you kind of did, and it didn't work.
Yes. And, you know, people go, did the comedy come first? The comedy definitely came first. But I was hardwired for the depression and suicide anyway. I just used the comedy to make it more digestible. You know, they call it comic relief for a reason. I mean, that's, and there's a psychological principle. You tell somebody something, if you tell somebody something really serious and you follow a little comic relief, they're mentally prepared for the next piece of serious business. So, and if I can make them cry with my story, because I get a little choked up, and then make them laugh, I take it from pole to pole, the impact on them, the emotional impact, the chances are they'll remember what they heard, at least the broad strokes, is far better than just having to sit through 90 minutes of morbidity and mortality. So.
Well, let me ask you this question. I know you said that your wife didn't know anything about it until the TEDx talk came out. How did that play out when you told her your story? I mean, did that strengthen you guys' relationship? Was it a difficult thing for her to digest?
No, she knew I'd been kind of moody on occasion, but she thought it was just carbohydrate related. You know, you drink a glass of orange juice. It actually strengthened the relationship because, and I advise people to do this when they're ready, come out to people that love you and will understand and be there for you when things go bad. Now she knows that if I'm in a bad mood, it's not something she did. She'll ask me, "Are you cycling down?" Or I'll tell her, "Look, I'm having a really bad day. I'm ready to depressed." So she doesn't get blindsided by it. She doesn't think it's her. And we've come to the point where we can joke about it, which is very helpful for me. One of the things that triggers my depression is disappointing her or anybody who's opinionated about it. So I'll do something stupid and I'll go, "Honey, you mad at me?" She goes, "No, honey, I'm not mad. I'm disappointed." Oh, so we can actually laugh about it, which helps take the edge off. Yeah, and I don't always share with her when I'm depressed. One day she was leaving for work and I was really depressed. And I'm in the yard doing some yard work. She's getting the car to go and I'm thinking, I'll tell her. And I'm like, you know what? If I tell her I'm depressed, she's not going to feel any better. I'm not going to feel, she's going to feel worse actually. And I'm not going to feel any better. So why? So it wasn't the point of suicide. And by the way, we should probably talk about before we leave, signs and symptoms of depression, thoughts of suicide, what to say, what not to say, what to do. Give your listeners their first lesson in mental health first aid.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions.
Yeah, because here's the thing. Here's the good news. 8 out of 10 people who are suicidal are ambivalent, which tells me they want somebody to notice something and step in. And 9 out of 10 people who are actively suicidal give hints that they're going to attempt in the last 7 days before they do, which again tells me they want somebody to pick up on the hint and step in. So the trick is, because you hear people say this all the time, he never gave any indication. Why didn't he say something? I had no idea. He never no hints, no evidence. Well, it's kind of like we train German Shepherds. And you hear somebody say, the dog bit me, never gave me any indication it was going to do it. Oh, yes, it did. First thing it did, froze. Second thing it did, their eyes go flat. Third thing, the ears go back. So the dog's throwing signals like, just don't come any closer. Please don't. I really don't want to bite you. And then, of course, the hackles go up. That's the big one. But they missed, whoever got bitten missed all that. So with suicides, when people say he never gave any indication, I'm guessing, unless they were that 1 or 2 out of 10 that wasn't going to, was hell-bent on dying, there were indications. You just have to know what you're looking for and looking at and listen for.
Yeah, I talk about that just in the ability to communicate with kids and other people. A lot of times it's, I can speak Korean to you and it's not going to matter much. You're not going to respond most likely.
Oh.
And I actually, one of the few people who actually know a little bit about Korean, I was in the Army and they sent me to the linguist school to teach people that, there's the secret is I can know what it means, but if I don't know how to communicate what I'm trying to say to you, if we're speaking on a different plane, then you don't know what I'm saying. And it's the same thing there, that if I don't know what I'm looking at in a kid, and kids are so challenging because especially in the foster system, this kid might have been with you for a day or a month or 3 years. And so you have a different level of knowledge and experience with this kid and an ability to communicate and their willingness to communicate. And so being able to read those signs and symptoms can be a real struggle. So what sort of things do you usually see that come out that are pretty decent indicators that we should at least, raise our own hackles a little bit and start digging?
Well, and I should tell you that every keynote that I do, I put my phone number on the screen, my cell phone. I tell the audience, look, if you're suicidal, call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, or now they have a text line. Text the word help to 741-741, because kids are more forthcoming in text, young people are.
Oh, yeah. We got a text.
Yeah. So I put my phone number on the screen, and I said, look, if you're suicidal, call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. If you're just having a really bad day, call a crazy person, and here's my number. Because like the Korean, is that the person and I speak the same language. We hear the same music. I'm far less likely to be judgmental or to what they call should all over them. You should do this and you should do that. I'm just there to co-sign whatever BS they're going through and listen. And so it's like the Korean, I speak the language I hear, they don't have to explain to me what they're going through. I understand completely. But here's a couple of prominent signs, signals of depression. Have trouble getting up in the morning, rallies in the afternoon. So if a kid's having trouble getting up and catching the school bus or whatever, but it seems in the afternoon they're full of beans. That's an indication. Socially isolated. Used to take a lot of joy in this social activity or that social activity back when we did social activities. and they've withdrawn, or they've withdrawn physically. They just, it's either they stay in their room, adults move. And we already talked about one, letting their personal hygiene go because they can't drag themselves out of bed to get a shower and run a load of wash. By the way, I think there's a lot of situational depression happening in the world, in the US, because of the pandemic. A lot of people who are neuronormal, neurotypical, who've never been depressed, are depressed because of the uncertainty of it all. And what worries me is they've never been depressed. They have no idea what that feels like. So they may not know why they can't get out of bed in the morning. I've been doing podcast after podcast after podcast, teaching neurotypical people how to survive. You need a self-care plan. You need to practice gamification. You need a routine to and get diagnosed. It may be short-term situational depression. You may need a little short-term med. Okay. The question comes up, what do you say to somebody who you believe is depressed after you notice these signs? Well, here's what you don't say. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Turn that frown upside down. You try to fish you off.
Put your big girl panties on.
Exactly. What you do say is, I'm here for you and mean it. I know you're not lazy, crazy, or self-absorbed. I understand that depression is a mental illness. Here's the good news. With time and treatment, things will get better. I'll take the time to help you get the treatment. Now, here's the tough one. You have to ask them, in no uncertain terms, are you having thoughts of suicide? If you can't ask that question, you find somebody who can. And let's say they're not forthcoming about their thoughts of suicide. How do you know they may be suicidal? Talk about death and dying. Googling death and dying. Death and dying appears as a theme in their music, their artwork, their writing. A friend of mine, whose son took his own life, he was a musician and he wrote original songs, original lyrics. And he had a notebook in which he wrote, the lyrics. He would never leave that notebook anywhere his mother could find it and look at it. He would take it to the bathroom with him. And when he passed away, she, of course, got the notebook, and his music, the lyrics were filled. If you were looking for a roadmap as to why it happened, it was all right there. But he wouldn't getting your affairs in order. And for a young person, it can be something as simple as giving away prized possessions, because they want to make sure those possessions go to the person they want them to go to when they're gone, the Xbox or whatever. And giving away a pet is top of that pyramid, because you want to make sure the pet is looked after. And of course, stockpiling medications or buying a gun. By the way, 3 times as many women attempt as men. Men tend to complete because they tend to use a gun. And the last one that and this is counterintuitive and I think extremely dangerous, is they've been depressed forever, and then for no apparent reason they're happy. And Lord, you're happy because finally they're happy. Well, it may be they're happy because they've chosen time, place, and method, and they know the pain. There's that word again. You know the pain is finite. Now let's say they are forthcoming. They go, yes, I'm having thoughts of suicide. What do you say? You say, do you have a plan? And if they say they have a plan, what is your plan? And if it's detailed, you need to get them on the phone with the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. If they won't pick up the phone, you pick up the phone, you call the Lifeline. The volunteer will do what they can to talk the phone into the hands of the person who's in crisis. And if, it comes up all the time, when do you dial 911? If they're in immediate danger to themselves or somebody else, you got no choice but to dial 911. That will probably buy them an involuntary detention order in 3 days, all expenses paid, in a lovely gated mental health community with no belt or shoestrings. But they'll be alive anyway. Now, this is something a psychiatrist and I have added to that list of questions. It's not in the psychological text anywhere. Let's say the plan is not particularly well formed. They got a plan, but it's not really time, place, method. They just kind of well, maybe I would hang myself or whatever. The next question I believe you should ask is, okay, well, are you going to kill yourself? And if they say no, then this is, I think, is the most important question. Okay, well, tell me why not. Make them give voice to whatever it is that's keeping them here. And in my case, I would tell you that I'm sort of like George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. After all those people come up to me after my presentations, and I have let them know that what they have has a name, they're not a freak, and they're not all alone, and perhaps steered them, off the path to suicide. If I were not here, if I took my own life, I would end up taking all those people with me who never had a chance to hear me assure them that they're not alone. A friend of mine goes, "You can't live with that?" I go, "No, man, I can't die with that." So I just that's one of my whys, why I don't kill myself right there.
Well, and Amanda's run off taking care of kids at the moment, but part of the reason this is such a topic that I think we need to talk about is we've had our own struggles in our family. As most of our listeners know, we lost our oldest daughter a few years ago to a nasty disease. And in that process, our 2 older sons are both teenagers, right? And, throughout time, we've had kids who have struggled mightily with mental health. We had one kid who we did take down and give him that 72-hour vacation. because he was talking about suicide. And here's the thing: is as a parent, we think we know what we're doing. We think we know what our kids are going through. He was just being a teenager, right? And then one morning, I get up from work and my phone has a notification that my YouTube thing has a comment or reply to my comment, and I'm like, what? I haven't commented on anything. I went and look, and somebody's like, "Don't do it, man. Talk to blah blah." And this guy's like encouraging me not to kill myself. And I thought, this is weird. And a little bit of research, and quickly I found that my son had gotten onto my YouTube account and was commenting on a video somewhere, and was some suicidal ideation. And that threw us for a loop. I didn't know how to handle it. And so we experienced that. I struggled hard. We ended up walking that road, taking him down to the hospital, letting him get checked out, and we had to do a lot of education. Fast forward a few more years, I had one of my other sons who told me a story that, I mean, quite honestly, today it's blown my socks off, because he talks about having the plan, having the place, having the whole thing together. And as much as I've always been a guy who's not about my kids doing drugs, right? I'm pretty hard against that whole idea. I try and keep drugs away from my kids. And this is part of the reason I think this one really struck me, was he told a friend that that's where what he was going to go do. He had the time, he had the place, he had a gun. And his friend said, "Well, man, before you do that, I want you to try something real quick. If it doesn't work, that's, do what you want." And the the kid handed him a drop of acid. And as much as I hate to admit that that's what saved him, he had some experience that to this day we talked about it deeply. He talks about, "I'll never deal with suicide ideation again because of what I went through and what I experienced." But these are kids who I knew were in hard times. They were in struggling times for sure. But I had no idea at that moment that they were that close to suicide. And these are kids that I know who've been in my house since they were little itty bitty, and they had both been in my house for over 10 years at that point, 10, 15 years, depending on which kid. And we're dealing with kids who may have been in your house for 6 weeks.
Yeah. Well, and I think the mistake businesses and some schools make is after a suicide, oftentimes they sweep it under the carpet. The person's there one day, gone the next. Problem is, everybody's got questions. Many people have survivor's guilt. I had planned to go so-and-so with him, but I got tied up and I couldn't make it. If I'd just been nicer to him, if I'd spoken to him in the elevator. So it's called suicide post-vention. Anybody who is anywhere close to a suicide, and the average suicide, I think it's 25 people are directly impacted at least. Those people need a session of suicide post-vention, where you take a look, you ask everybody for their feelings and impressions. What's happened is everybody, chances are, had a piece of the puzzle that when put together completely and you step back, you can see it coming. But not everybody had every piece of the puzzle. It's sort of like that movie in the book, The Perfect Storm. The reader knows that the storms are approaching from three directions. It's going to be bad. But the guys on a little boat have no idea. But if you take a 10,000-foot view, you can see the storms coming. So that's what a friend of mine said. You put the puzzle together, everybody backs up, and you can see that this was probably going to happen. She calls it the tyranny of hindsight. But at least it answers questions, and you can talk through the survivor's guilt. And I wish I'd been nicer to them. Just decode all that so that everybody can move on. But if you don't do that, especially with young people, they fill in the blanks as best they can with what happened. And sometimes, it could be dangerous. It could be, and with kids, oftentimes, if one young person does it, you could find yourself in a cluster. One person goes over that barrier or through that, then you may have other ones in the area, in their peer group. It's like cutting. Non-lethal self-harm. A young person is more likely to be cutting themselves if somebody in their peer group is doing it as well. So it's a lot about education at the proper point.
I think there's also a lot of stigma that goes along with it too. we had, well, we still have him because he's ours. But we had a child who was cutting, and he was male, and it was very surprising to see that, a lot of people think that that's just something that girls do.
Yeah,
And
it's like
I was kind of amazed by that.
anorexia and bulimia. I mean, I've known some wrestlers in my time, and you got to make weight.
Yeah.
And so when people think anorexia, bulimia, they think women, but there are a goodly number of men who have, that dysmorphia. Anyway, have
Body
that.
dysmorphia.
Big pardon?
Body dysmorphia. That sounds right.
Yep. There are a goodly number of men who live with that as well. But again, it's a matter of education. One of the reasons that I think I have an impact on audiences is a lot of people have an idea in their mind what mental illness looks and sounds like. You got a guy up on stage who's a comedian, obviously high functioning, in a good mood. I'm not what a lot of people would, if you ask them to describe somebody with mental illness. I wouldn't be their, first. They wouldn't be describing me. It's a guy on the corner holding a sign, we'll work for food. And that's fourth stage mental illness. The system has failed them all the way down the line. They're on, probably on their way out. But yeah, so it's part of my job is there's actually something called Stand Up for Mental Health. It's a class to be, it's for people who have mental illness and want to write and perform stand-up comedy based on their mental illness. And you have to have a diagnosis to get in the class. You have to have a diagnosis to teach the class. So it's part peer counseling, part, comedy class. And then they perform, sometimes for money, but sometimes just community events to destigmatize, to give people a different view. Public speaking terrifies people. So not only are they public speaking, but they're public speaking after, on things, on mental illness, their own mental illness. I mean, that's powerful to see somebody get up on stage and, come clean about their mental illness and make jokes of it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, it was like the world was stunned when Robin Williams took his life. So many people, well, he's so funny and
people loved him. He had so much to live for.
Yeah.
I believe he was living with bipolar disorder. And then that's probably why he self-medicated. That's why he was in, rehab all the time or oftentimes. And then he had heart surgery, which can make you even more depressed. I know because I've had two of them. And then he had a Parkinson's-like disease, I think, and his memory was going on top of that. And if you're an actor and your memory goes, even though he had millions in the bank and millions of people loved him, I imagine he just wanted to end the pain.
Yeah, but I mean, people looked at him and they're like, oh, he has all these things going on for him. What, And it's like we can't see beyond ourselves.
Well, and I've said many times, for me, it's hardwiring. I've been most depressed and most suicidal at some of the best times in my life. Always worried back then, what's going to happen when it hits the fan and I feel this way? And well, we now know. So, not situational in my case. Situation can trigger it, like a bankruptcy, but not situation.
So, what would you tell somebody's wife, like your wife? How does your guys' relationship work? How does she help you? How do you guys communicate so that she knows when things are going wrong or you need help or you guys are very open?
Yeah, what does support look like for you?
Well, like I said, I tell her when I'm cycling down so that I'll snap at her out of nowhere and she wonders what she's done wrong. So you have to open up the lines of communication and be honest about how you're feeling. And she does the same for me. She goes, look, I'm really tired today, or whatever it happens to be. So don't, what we say is we give each other amnesty at those moments. Don't take any offense. It has nothing to do with you. I'm just, that helps a lot. And in the books we've written, I think it's book number 2, it's all wrapped around automobile metaphors, the brain and the car, kind of, back and forth like that. And one of the things we say is you need a pit crew like they have when you're racing cars. When you pull into the pit and you got an issue, you get surrounded by all these people and they know what to do and know how to do it. So you have to I believe you surround yourself with people that care about you and know what you're going through and are there. So it's set up in advance if there's an issue. It's kind of like with a car, you buy a new car, and I always get a AAA membership because I know it's sooner or later, even though the car is new, I'm going to have a flat tire, I'm going to run out of gas, I'm going to take keys out of my car, something. So you prepare ahead of time. There's a spare in the trunk and a jack and a first aid kit and flares because, and you also have to have, my wife is well aware that I have a self-care plan: diet, exercise, good night's sleep, meditation, medication. And so that I got an email from a guy somewhere in Europe who had a lovely wife, darling 8-year-old daughter, 40 years old, great job, and said to me, Frank, I can't tell you the last time I was happy. And he was writing me because he'd come across one of my TED Talks, because up to that point, he thought he was all alone feeling that way. And he goes, I saw your TEDx, and I realized for the first time in my life that I'm not affected. And so I encouraged him, when time comes and you're comfortable, I think you should the proper setting, come out to your wife, and then eventually to your daughter when she's ready, when she, in terms she would understand. So they can be there for you. And then, then your extended family, then friends and family at that point. My workout partner is, he said to me one day, how you feeling? I said, I'm wretchedly depressed. I said, what does that look like? He didn't say you should do this or you should do that. He goes, what's it look like? I said, well, remember when you're 18? He goes, yeah. Every other thought you had was about women? Yeah. He goes, what's every other thought for you today? Going back home, crawling into bed, binge watching Netflix, second season of Ozark. And then, because I could give voice to that, we finished the workout. I got all the way through the workout, and I ended up not going home right away and crawling in bed. I got the rest of my day taken care of. Then I went home. It got dark. Then I went to bed. But the mere fact that I can say, here's the thing. I get tired of saying, I'm good. When people say, how you doing? Every now and then, when I'm tired, my editor goes to sleep. I got in an Uber after 2-3 hours since I prevention CE courses I taught. I'm exhausted. Nice young kid. Our eyes lock in the rearview mirror. He goes, how you doing, man? I go, I'm depressed and suicidal. How about you? He goes, what am I supposed to say to that? I go, you really want to know? He goes, yeah. I said, you're supposed to ask me if I have a plan. Pause. Do you have a plan? And then a longer pause, and he goes, does it involve Uber?
I hope you're doing well.
Brilliant. Yeah. So, yeah, just being able to say out loud to my wife, I'm depressed, or my workout partner, I'm depressed, or somebody that calls up, how you doing? If I can really tell them rather than having to cover it up. It's people with mental illness oftentimes great actors. That's why people don't realize, that they are, because I don't want to burden anybody. If they got bad though, we have 2 handguns in the house. My wife has one. I have one. People go, how can you do that? You're suicide. Here's the deal. If I got to the point where that was an issue, I would march them across the street to my friend Randy. Go, here, take these and don't give them back till I tell you, because I'm in a bad way and I just don't want to have these in the house. So it's all part of the learning process. Anyway, that's signs, symptoms, and solution. Oh, and one last thing. There's an outfit called NAMI, National Alliance of Mental Illness. Mm-hmm. And AMI. Pretty much in every county in the country, they've got an office. And they have peer-to-peer counseling, family-to-family counseling. If your child is schizoaffective, they got a 12-week course for the family on what do you say, what don't you say? How do you find resources? So a friend of mine who's an insurance agent, a friend in the chamber, commerce, that saved his family, saved his marriage, because they had a child with schizoaffective disorder. They were at loose ends. Somebody told them about NAMI. Took a 12-week course. I mean, it's not perfect, but the kids, this is 10 years later, the child's still alive, now a young man, and the family's still together. But they wouldn't survive without NAMI. The best thing about NAMI is that it's all free. They don't charge anything. So I'm a big proponent.
Free help is always amazing.
Yeah, and they raise money other ways. But yeah, it's all free, all volunteer driven, all free.
Well, yeah, because I've heard so often is, we can't afford this. We can't continue to afford treatment. they're a specialist, so it's a higher copay, and
Yeah.
just had to let this go so that we can eat for the week, or pay our bills or whatever. And so I know that when it comes to mental health and substance abuse, a lot of people cannot afford to continue treatment.
hmm Which is a crying shame in the richest country in the world. Don't get me started.
I don't disagree.
Yeah, at least with the ACA, they finally forced them to do parity between physical health and mental health in terms of coverages. Because before that, if I had a heart attack, it's covered 80/20 after my deductible. If I have a bipolar meltdown, well, you get 6 visits with a psychoanalyst this year.
Yep. Yep.
So,
It's a challenge for sure. And I know people are struggling with mental health across the world, especially in the middle of this pandemic, because, people just don't know how to handle this. And I'm not surprised. And, it's, again, free resources are amazing. Like having you to talk to people all over the place and coming out and finding yourself on podcast and being the guest places in the TEDx talks, helping people, that's a thing that I wish there was a way to quantify the number of lives that you and your story will have impacted over time. And I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking about this here, because it's such a deep topic in our little niche here of the world that most people are afraid to talk about. And I appreciate you being willing to come on and tell your story and talk to people and give helpful things to people so that we can be more equipped to deal with kids and trauma.
well, and please put my cell phone number in the show notes. And like I said, if you're suicidal, call the lifeline or text the text line. If you're just having a bad day, call it crazy. Because, or if there's someone you love is having a bad day and you have no idea, resources, what do I do? Or how do I speak to them? Or, what don't I mean, so I get calls like that where it's not the person, but it's someone they love. And they just want to do the right thing, the best thing. So I just give advice like NAMI, or your child's schizoaffective. But listen, NAMI's got a 12-week course, 1 night a week. I'm telling you, it's life-changing. It's free. So.
Yeah, and to the people in the foster system, we have lots of kids that are affected by lots of things that we don't always know what they are up front. So
yeah,
educating yourself is a game changer.
Yeah, I would say mental health first aid. If you're dealing with foster children, take the youth version, because it's all about young people and the signs and symptoms.
That was mentalhealthfirstaid.org, right?
Yep. And I'm sure they're doing it by Zoom nowadays, but if let's say the pandemic wasn't raging, if you put your zip code in and put a 25-mile radius, I bet you'll find a half dozen classes in the next month or so, all over the place.
Yeah, I'll make sure I've gotten, I think, most of these written down. I'll make sure all these websites and all these pieces get put into the show notes so that people can find that. And for some reason, I've had some problem with Apple Podcasts lately, and the links don't tend to work on their show notes for some reason. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I can't figure that out. So if that doesn't work there, you can always go over to the website, fostercarenation.com, and you can just click on podcast notes. You'll find a picture that'll probably look a lot like Frank King, and click on that one. The show notes there will work.
Yeah, all these wonderful, wonderful resources.
Well, it's like I said, it's a matter of speaking up and educating. See something, say something. Suicide is the most preventable cause of death on the planet. And 8 out of 10 people are ambivalent. 9 out of 10 give hints. So that tells me we can, and this is what I say at the end of every keynote. We can make a difference. We can save a life, and we can do it by doing something as simple as what we're doing right this minute, which is starting a conversation.
Amen. Because conversation is the key to all of it. If we hide from it and we pretend it doesn't exist, it can take down a lot of people that way.
Yeah, silence kills, I'm afraid, and the more we speak out about it, and if you live with somebody who's struggling with depression, I always suggest you and the person, adult, a child of a certain age, because there's disturbing things in my TEDx. You have to make that decision. But sit down and watch my first TEDx, A Matter of Laugh or Death. Because what I'm doing is I'm trying to decode for neuronormal people my thought process in terms of suicide. How do you get there? How do you get to that point? And I've had couples sit down where one spouse is depressed and the other isn't, and they watch it together. And a friend of mine said he's neuronormal, she's got depression. And he's watching her watching me. When it gets done, she never told anybody outside the family that she was living with depression. Very quiet about it. Stay-at-home mom, on medication, but it wasn't, you know. She turns to him after seeing me on stage. She goes, first of all, I didn't think anybody talked out loud about this stuff. And B, nobody goes on YouTube. We're going to be distributed around the world. And so it was a game changer for her. It was an epiphany. And I have a coffee clutch when you can do that kind of thing once a month. Get together with all my crazy friends. They're called the Crazy Coffee Clutch. We take our game faces off, you know, the ones we show the world, and we're just ourselves for now. And she joined in the group. And I mean, it was life changing for her, I think, to realize how many of us are out there and that people talk about it openly. And, you know, it's again, it's silence that kills.
Yeah, and destigmatizing any sort of suicidal thoughts or problems, depression, destigmatizing that as the first step in that conversation. So I appreciate you being willing to do that and share your story with the world, man, because you know, that's something I don't know how many people mention it. Probably more than a couple have mentioned it to you, but the number of lives affected, if you had a way to quantify that, I think it would probably have to blow your hair back a little bit to realize the number of people there.
Yeah, you know, because with YouTube, I mean, I'm sure there are people I'll never know, never meet that it had an impact like that on just seeing somebody else, you know, in the same boat, especially if you thought you were all alone.
Yeah.
You know.
And, you know, it's amazing that generational effect that happens when you've helped one person who then has kids and passes that help on down the line. So the world will be different in 100 years by a long stroke just because of what you're doing.
Well, I got a DM from somebody the other day. Somebody reached out on Twitter to connect with, and she said something on the order of, I can't believe it's you. She goes, I was having the worst period of my life last fall, and I stumbled on your YouTube video. And I thought, well, if he can make it. And she goes, it gave me the courage to keep on, and she took a sabbatical from her job. She said the best thing I ever did. Got my, you know, together and went back to work. And, you know, I thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story and, you know, and saving my life. So that's my why. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
Sounds like you saved more lives than the guy in the restaurant.
Yeah, I'm still fascinated by everybody just staring at it.
Oh, they either stare or they take out their phones and they record it.
Yeah. And what shocked me was, because as I'm running toward him, it's 300 people in this venue. You're supposed to have one of those AEDs, you know, the paddles.
Yep.
Right.
And I screamed at the whoever was working the room for the venue, get the AED. This is what I hear. We don't have one. Oh, God. Oh, yeah.
Somebody get a car battery and a set of jumper cables.
Exactly. I'm going to have to kiss this guy. Oh, God. Anyway, well, guys, thanks ever so much for having me on.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming on and talking with us today and spreading your wisdom, because this is a conversation that we believe needs to be started. Well, and I'm delighted you invited me, because I mentioned that near the top, my wife was a foster child, a number of foster homes, and the one foster mother that she's still in contact with probably saved her life. So she wouldn't be here if it were not for the foster kids. I'm grateful for all that they do.